that a lot of performance work has become, the collaborative dimensions of performance are almost naturalized, or had been in some ways naturalized for me. I would say several years ago, I didn't know I was in a group art form. I didn't know I was in a durational art form in the way that I feel that I know that in a different way now from certain kinds of new types of encounters, I would say, in the last 10 years. And so so I think that there's things about questions of mediation bring forward, these other ideas about who's the author, who's influenced, who takes primacy, et cetera, that it's interesting to me that that's such a problem, I suppose. Yes, we have things like playwrights in the theater. Yes, we have things like directors in the theater. But there's also this other way that the attachment of a certain kind of practice to a certain kind of individual, and the need to do that in order to deliver credit, is interestingly unfamiliar to me. So I try to keep it unfamiliar. I think also this also reflects on the last question. I support a lot of community art work, and Larry mentioned one in the opening, a project that we've been doing in Richmond in the Bay Area. And one thing that one of the central artists working on that project says is, this is a project that has definite social aspirations, and it probably would be one that someone like Bishop would be concerned about its instrumentalization. It has aspirations to certain kinds of social effects. In that process, she's the central artist running the project, Shannon Flattery, has talked about what her self-nomination as an artist still does for her in a context where she's interviewing health workers or homeless activists or police officers, that there's something about the lack of clarity about what an artist is that is enabling to her and allows for a certain kind of conversation that, especially in a context where individuals are used to having social worker investigators at their door wanting to interview them, or find themselves in varieties of very tense situations with welfare interviewers. Have you been working? All of these kinds of things. That there's something about mediating under the category of art that opens a different kind of conversation for her. So.
Okay, I think we actually don't have too much time left, and I wanted to give you all an opportunity to ask questions. I'm sure you have some, so yes.
I just had a comment about my piece, Dead in Iraq, that's sort of appropriate for what we were talking about in terms of framing and mediation. So the opposite of what you just said that I found when I first started engaging in the action and began going into some of the game blogs and the different environments where people were commenting on the work and really attacking me quite brutally. And I jumped into the discussions to defend myself and my actions. As soon as I identified myself as an artist, I was dismissed. It was like a complete, fuck off, you liberal, professor, artist, away kind of thing. And it was really, it really pushed me to a position of having to, take that back on them and say, oh, wait a minute, I'm a citizen, I pay taxes, I'm an artist, this is,
I believe in freedom.
Yeah, it's completely legitimate to be questioning, what is happening in my name, these soldiers who are supposedly representing us, and all of that. But I think there's oftentimes, that was just something I was sort of surprised at, but not really. And when I first would engage in discussions about it, I'd be reticent about identifying myself as an artist, but it actually pushed me to, in some ways, kind of embrace that and say, yeah, I'm an artist, damn it, and I got something to say. So it kind of cuts both ways sometimes.
Thank you. Yes, in front.
of this. It's okay, thanks. The spirit of NATO's presentation, because it showed the paradoxes in what we're dealing with, and I think that's great to flag them up right at the front. And on that note, I was just listening to the presentations. I've been thinking about destructive catharsis and how self-commodification can be a form of liberation from commodification, because that is a paradox. And on that note, I was thinking about your presentation and how you explored stereotyping and so on. I felt a bit uneasy with the spirit. I felt it was a bit good and bad in the way that good, you know, who... Yeah, the spirit of the action, but yeah. How to explain that I felt that it was problematic in the sense that, yeah, it got to the good and bad rather than realising that what might be going on when people use stereotypes isn't just what it seems to be. Yeah, so the presentation that NATO gave about the complexities of power relations and how sometimes somebody who might be saying, this is my own voice now, that they're liberating you, may not. For instance, a manager who's very good at using rhetoric, and somebody who might seem to be stereotyping you, like saying things that you heard in the supermarket, might actually be trying to establish a basis for communication. So, and that going through the motions of inhabiting things, which problematic power structures, going through the motions of inhabiting them and purging them is a form of coming back to this concept of destructive catharsis, a purge through moving through it, rather than the idea that you can oppose it. The opposition might legitimize it simply by being the counter-ideological bent of the ideology. I don't know what anyone thinks about any of that.
Well, I think a panel later today or tomorrow is subversive complicity. So Saturday, thank you. So there'll be an in-depth discussion about that. But if any of you have thoughts on that,
yeah, I want to thank you for that observation. I should clarify that I have been a long-time fan of both Bjork and Matthew Barney's work. And so, I mean, the performance itself is trying to riff on her big-time sensuality video that's very famous on the flatbed truck. So actually some of the movements were trying to gesture towards that. And even the song choices, it takes courage to enjoy it. I mean, and it was an attempt for me to embody the thing that is most scary for me to embody, that is a geisha stereotype. And so I do realize that it may seem as just the critique, that is my presence could be critiquing the work as problematic or culturally appropriative or whatever, but also the experience of embodying stereotypes is itself this, I mean, you said it nicely, this kind of cathartic, destructive, cathartic commodification, something. Anyways, but there's a kind of emotional experience that you go through in terms of trying to actually act out the thing that you most fear being projected onto you, and then also having to allow for the space that you're going to be misrecognized as that thing itself, right? In other words, you will be misrecognized as the pretty geisha rather than, to me, the most abject drag queen I could possibly be, right? And so, anyways, so my experience of the intervention is a much more ambivalent one, that is a love-hate relationship. But I can also see the way the reception of the piece could seem very much like my shaming. Oh, I'm pissed, you know. But and there's more love there than might be obvious.
I just wanted to say something. I know we're running out of time, because your comment does relate to some concerns that I've had too about whether say when institutional critique becomes equal to anti-institutional critique, and that a range of positions isn't possible there, and actually can become sort of routinized into good and bad. I'm radical, Buchlo's radical, Mass Mocha's the institution and the man, and he isn't. And I think that to me the provocation for thinking about the ways institutions connect us, however equivocally, is something that I'm really interested in, social practices that induce us to come to terms with that relation, that sort of systemic relation, and thinking about the necessity